In an era where data is often called the new oil, securing your digital assets isn't just important, it's mission critical. From customer information to proprietary algorithms, your digital assets are the lifeblood of your business. But with cyber threats evolving at lightning speed, how can you ensure that your digital crown jewels stay protected? That's exactly what we're diving into today. We'll be peeling back the layers of digital security, exploring everything from cloud storage vulnerabilities to the power of multi-factor authentication, which wah
Wah, wah.
wah. We'll tackle the human elements to discussing how employee training can be your first line of defense against cyber attacks. Our guest today is Vi Wickam of Wizard of Ads. And he's been on before, and we've talked about Google and we've talked about SEO. But today, we're talking all about securing your digital assets. And whether you're a tech-savvy startup founder or a seasoned business owner, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of cybersecurity, this is going to be the episode for you because it's going to be packed with actionable insights to help you fortify your digital fortress. So welcome back in, Vi.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, on the last podcast, I briefly mentioned, I had a little foray into this. It wasn't a huge deal and it didn't involve anybody's information or anything like that. But you guys stepped in, helped me fix it and all of that.
Yeah.
But we're seeing a lot of this lately. And what are you seeing as the most common vulnerabilities that people have with their digital assets today?
Well, I would say the most common vulnerability I see is people who reuse passwords, which is like, that's a common old thing.
Where's my want button? Because
I can't tell you how many times I have a client give me a password and then I ask for a password for a different asset that we need to help them with. And they're like, oh, it's the same. I'm like, oh no, don't do that.
We all do it, right? All of us.
Well, the real trouble is when you do that, you're putting your password in the hands of a website. And if that website gets hacked, your password got compromised. And there are a lot of big companies whose data has been compromised in that way, including Twitter and Adobe. Actually, check me on Twitter. I'm not 100% sure on that, but Adobe and there's been a ton of big name companies who've had big compromises in the data. The U.S. government has. The Veterans and Foreign Affairs, like the Veterans database, was completely compromised, and this was years ago, but tons of people's data is out there, which sometimes it's just your name and your email address, but sometimes it's your password too.
Right.
And if you're reusing your password, they get your password on one site and they've got your password everywhere. So it really is critical that you use passwords that are different across sites.
That's so hard. How do you remember them all?
Well, I use LastPass.
Okay.
And LastPass is one of a handful of good password safes out there.
Okay.
There's no perfect answer, but LastPass allows me to store my passwords in an encrypted format, and it allows me to share passwords with specific permissions to different groups of people. So there's the personal version of LastPass where you can import your passwords from Chrome or Firefox or Safari, whichever password safe you're currently using. So browser storage of passwords is kind of like, that's level one of, pretty okay.
Okay.
It's not great. But, Apple also has the Apple password key safe that is useful. And it's useful across wherever you're using that browser. So if you're using a Google phone and a Google browser, it'll transfer between those two. Same thing with Apple. If you're using iPhone and Safari and you're using an Apple computer, those will transfer, get your passwords personally across those two places. So you can share passwords with yourself. But we're talking about business here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to business, something like LastPass has the ability that I can create folders that are then shared with my employees. And I can create an administration folder, and I
Oh,
can
great.
create a clients folder, and then I can create separate subfolders for the different clients. And then I can share those appropriately to my employees. And I can say, these, like this folder is shared to this employee, but it's read only. So this employee can edit the passwords. This one can only read them. And this employee can't see the passwords. They can only use the passwords. And then if an employee is terminated, I can just terminate their access from LastPass, and they'll never see those passwords again.
And said that's also helpful if you're working with a third party who's doing advertising or who's doing, whatever for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's
Anything that they're doing online for you, you can share, or you can share via folder if you're using the business version of it. So, and it's reasonably inexpensive. It's like, I think $35 a year for the personal version. And I think it's like $3 per employee per month for the business version. So relatively inexpensive. And, you don't need the business version really until you've got like 5 employees or so.
The thing that I worry about with all of the stuff that is online, I've been using Dropbox a lot. I'm the person that puts all my stuff on my desktop.
Sure.
I don't want to look at my desktop, but I've been trying to be more
having palpitations here.
And my husband's gotten on me about it. So finally he switched me to a Mac, which I'm telling you is going to be the death of me. I'm going to figure it out. It's going to be okay because I'm a PC girl through and through.
Yeah.
But
I understand.
I figured out how to use Dropbox. I'm putting everything in there. And all of a sudden, I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and go, oh my gosh, what if all my stuff is gone? What if all my stuff is gone from, how is that secure? How is Dropbox and other cloud storage spots safe?
Again, it's as secure as your password.
Oh.
So, So generally speaking, like there could be a data breach at Google Drive or at Microsoft OneDrive or at Dropbox. Like it is a data center or a series of data centers around the world where that stuff's stored in. But the reality is, no matter what you've got, that data's out there in the world, and anybody can get hacked.
Right.
You try to put your trust in people that are less likely to get hacked. So, I do have a Dropbox account where I store some stuff. I also have a Google Drive account, which is where I store my business stuff and some of my personal stuff. And I use a tool called Backblaze. Backblaze.
Okay.
And it's like Carbonite. Carbonite is another cloud backup solution, but I back up everything on my hard drive plus everything that's in Dropbox and Google Drive on my personal drives to Backblaze.
Okay.
So I wouldn't live without it. And additionally, everything that's on my first hard drive gets backed up to a second hard drive. So
does it automatically do this? Because
I have mine set up to do. So Backblaze totally runs automatically.
Okay.
And I have an overnight backup job that I set up for myself. I am a little obsessive about backups because I ran an IT company for 15 years. And when you see what happens when people don't run backups,
I can't hear it because I have anxiety over that.
You have to run backups. So my wife uses a Mac. I'm a PC guy. And we both use Backblaze. So we both have Backblaze running everything. She also has the Macintosh, the Apple backup thing, which I can't think of the name of right now, but she has that running to an external hard drive that she runs, I think, once a week or something like that to back everything up to that as well. So I think that having multiple backup redundancies, at least 2, is a good idea. So having some sort of physical backup to a different physical medium and then having a cloud backup is a good idea.
Right.
The good thing about something like Google Drive for Business is there's some retention built into it where if somebody deletes something from your company drive, there's a window of time where you can restore that.
Oh.
And so I've had this
employee leaves
and decides to delete everything.
Okay.
You'll be able to recover that. And so I had this prior to Google Drive being a thing with one of my clients where their office manager got fired and she just like selected their server shared hard drive and hit delete. And, we had a backup from the night before, but, they still had to hire us to come out and restore that drive. So, you don't want to be having to deal with that either. And, this is outside the scope of what I thought we were going to talk about, but this is important stuff too.
This is what happens when you're on a podcast with me. You start unearthing things, and then I'm like, oh, well, let's dig into this.
Well, what about this? And what about this?
Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Okay. This used to drive me crazy because I'm like, really? Why do I have to do this? I would get flustered. I would get upset. What's the importance?
Well, the importance is if somebody has taken your password and you have multi-factor authentication turned on, they can use that password but not be able to get in. So they'll get to the point where they try to log in and it says, please enter your 6-digit code, and you have your cell phone or you have the authenticator app on your cell phone, and they're SOL because they don't have the authenticator app. So I will be vulnerable here and let you know that there's one or two social media platforms that I never use that I have an old password on that I probably haven't reset. I don't actually even know if I've reset it in the last 5 years, but I have 2-factor authentication turned on, and I know that it's going to text my cell phone every time I try to log in. So if somebody tried to hack into it, I know that I've got that as my validation.
Sure. So we should have that set up on everything we possibly can have.
Every online account that you can set up 2FA on, you should absolutely set up 2-factor authentication.
Awesome. So in the realm of, we're talking about security, how often or how do we, first of all, how do we, and then how often should we be doing an assessment of our digital our digital assets to see where there's a loophole or where something needs to be shored up a little bit more?
So the truth is most people have never done it. And that's where the real problem is. So if you've never done it, you absolutely should do it right away. This is a critical thing to do to determine what your risks are, to put patches in place. Those risks could include things like, well, I don't have automatic updates turned on my computers, or, we have a publicly available computer that doesn't have a password on it at all, to we've shared these passwords with 7 people and 2 of those people are no longer around, but we haven't changed the password. Or our domain name is registered with the guy that made our website 7 years ago, and he's still doing the renewals and we don't have any access to that domain name. So if you've never done that, you need to do it today. And we have a tool up on wizardofadsonline.com/weasels that you can weasels. Yeah. So the reason there is we've got a joke name for digital people who don't have the client's best interests at hand. And we call them digital weasels because there are classes on how to take people for $1,000 a month, how to make $250,000 a year without working.
Oh my gosh.
And how to sell people on $1,000 a month SEO plan, where basically what you do is you set up a report that emails them once a month, and then you don't do anything. And by the time they're upset, you found somebody else to fill it up, and it's a terrible, terrible scam. But there are a lot of digital people who are unethical. There are even more that are just lazy. And, so you've got to protect yourself when you're buying digital services, whether that's SEO services or ads management services or web development services or data management services. Any of these things, you need to make sure that your assets are secured, that, which includes things like LastPass. You need something that's going to manage your passwords. You need to make sure that you own your domain and that you control your domain. You need to make sure that all of your employees are using emails that are at your domain. So, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients who, well, yeah, all our technicians are using Gmail addresses because we didn't want to pay for Google Workspace. I'm like, okay, so you're saving $70 a month. And the potential cost to you is that employee has all of these communications with customers.
Right.
And now they can, you part ways with them and they're like, I'm going to just email all those customers and tell them, hey, I'm on my own now and I'm going to do the work for half the price that they're going to do it. And,
people forget that. Like I am the same way with cell phones.
Yeah.
Like, don't get a customer cell phone on somebody's personal phone. It needs to be on a business phone.
Right. And so one of the options there is a service like Ring Central where you have a company line that forwards to their cell phones, because the truth is landlines are pretty much gone away. Like,
what's that?
Yeah. But you do want to have that control and that oversight of those communications. So if you use a service like Ring Central or 10 others that are similar, I say Ring Central because that's what we signed up for. Sure. But it's not like that's the only one, or, that it's magic. But you can say each of you get these numbers and it rings on their phone in an app, and you have a virtual phone system where you've got your main office number, and then you've got a call tree basically that splits up who gets what calls. If they press 1 for sales, it rings to this person, then this person. And, because you don't really want employees making phone calls to customers on personal lines as a rule of thumb.
Right. Absolutely. It's a good rule of thumb to have in your business.
Yeah.
So worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Some breach happens in your business. What do you do? Like, what should I be doing? What should my step be?
Well, you got to figure out first whether it's a real breach or it's a spoofing. So what you had was a spoofing, where somebody had scraped the content off your website and presented themselves as if they were you.
Right.
Which I've seen, like, most of the time on Facebook, when people say your Facebook was hacked, that's what's happened, is somebody scraped your photo and they scraped your last 3 posts, and then they posted that on a new profile and gave it the same name as yours, and they're impersonating you.
Got it.
And, they're impersonating you to try and take advantage of your friends or take advantage of your reputation as a business. And, using all of the content that you've created and all the goodwill that you've created. And so obviously you've got to nip those in the bud, but it's an entirely different process to do that than it is to undo a hack. So, an example of a hack is somebody compromised your website and put malicious code on your website. So now when somebody visits your website, it's trying to download that malicious code on everybody's computers.
I see. Versus a spoofing, they just take nobody can do a transaction on that page. It's just.
Well, maybe they could, but it's not going to be with you. So that's very often when somebody steals website content and spoofs you, what they're really trying to do is steal credit cards from people.
Oh, I see.
And potentially also steal money. So if they have an actual account tied to it, somebody will check out on that site, they'll get the money, and they will, take that money and never deliver anything. And the person will call you and say, hey, I bought something from you and I never received it. And you're like, well, nobody played. I've got no record of you in my customer database. You don't like, I've got no reason to believe this. And they're like, well, let me forward you the email confirmation I got. And you see that it's at a different website when they forward it to you. And you're like, well, this wasn't us. And then you've got to figure out who it was so that you can get them removed and get them taken down, which is a huge hassle, as you know.
Yes.
But if, you know, like in my 27 years of doing web stuff, I've had a couple of times where somebody I hosted got hacked. Mostly, though, what I've done is I've had clients come on because they've gotten hacked on somebody else's hosting, and I've had to clean up the mess. And I believe so strongly in my hosting that I have a guarantee that if somebody gets hacked and I'm maintaining the site, that they won't pay me any extra to clean it up, because I make sure that WordPress is up to date and the plugins are up to date. So when you talk about security, very often when you're talking about something like WordPress, the problem is they've got out-of-date plugins that had a security vulnerability. And, you know, because the plugin's so far out of date, you know, it might be 3 years or 5 years out of date. And, you know, there's things in the web that have changed. The rules are always in flux. If that vulnerability is found and they haven't updated to patch it, you know, you're a sitting duck.
You're right.
You're just waiting to get hacked. So our goal is to make sure that doesn't happen. But when it does, you have to root it out on the server and find all the traces of it, because very often those people that do that will leave backdoors and leave code in places you wouldn't expect it so that they can get back in later.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, it's a crazy world.
I mean, I know we could talk about this for hours and hours, but appreciate everything that you've shared with our listeners today, because this is great information. And I'm sure we'll have you on again to really go in depth. But if our listeners would like to get a hold of you, how can they do so?
So you can find me on my business website at wizardofadsonline.com.
Okay.
And if you're looking for my music, you can find that at vithefiddler.com.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Vi, again, for being on and sharing with all of our listeners.
Oh, my pleasure, Jennifer. Always a pleasure to get to hang out with you.
Fabulous. And thank you, everyone, and have a fabulous day.
Bye.
Bye. Woohoo!